Hi friends, Tracy here from the Sewing Channel. Welcome back, and if you're new here, welcome. Today's tutorial is all about the vintage Union Square quilt block. Not only are we going to use really cute fabric, we are going to offset the Union Square quilt block, giving it a totally different look. If you stay with me till the end of this video, I will share with you a tip on how you would construct the Union Square block when it is offset. Enough talking already. Let's get busy offsetting our quilt blocks. I purchased my fat quarter bundle at Joann Fabrics. I just couldn't resist this darling fruit print. Berries, the blueberries, the raspberries, the cherries, and then it has this darling green stripe. And then we have this checkered picnic almost look. Some blueberries, and then we have almost like a panel type fabric. I ended up fussy cutting the centers for my Union Square block. How cute. I ended up using everything in this fat quarter bundle. This is what you'll need right here to make one Union Square block. Offset. Typically, a Union Square goes like this, but I think it adds so much more character if we fussy cut the centers and turn it offset. You'll need one center at 4.5 inches, fussy cut. Mine was fussy cut on the bias, so be real careful after you cut it that you don't pull on it and mess with it too much. For the frame area right here, you will need one 5.25 inch squared piece of fabric cut in 4 on the diagonal. For these center star points right here, you will need to do the same. And I have not cut these yet. You'll want to go corner to corner. Now I do cut mine separately. When I've tried to put 2 or more together, I slip sometimes, and then I get so mad because my block doesn't end up turning out right. It's cut too short or wonky. So we're going to cut corner to corner, and then we're going to go opposite corner to corner. And then we'll do it again with this piece because we need 2. You will end up with 8 triangles. For the background fabric, I chose a white. You'll need one 5.25 inch squared piece of fabric cut on the diagonal twice, giving you 4 triangles. You'll also need 4 2.5 inch squared pieces for the background. The square right here for the outer star, which are my berries, you will need 4 2.5 inch squared pieces of fabric. I forgot to mention the background squares in the white that I had right here. Those are these 4 right here on the corners. You'll need 4 of a print and 4 in a white or the background fabric that you choose, but these are 3 inches because we are going to make them into half square triangles to make the points on the outer star. You definitely want to stay organized with this block. So all of my other pieces are cut, so I need to work on those 3 inch squares. And what I'm going to do is put right sides together. We need to mark the center of our block. Now how I'm going to do that is I'm going to use this 1/2 inch tiny ruler, and I'll link it down below in the description box. You want to measure from that corner to this corner. And how I'm going to do that is lay this yellow black line on this ruler so that it is right on top of that point. And then I'm going to line it up down here. So it's lined up there on that point, and it's lined up there. And then I'm going to go ahead and just mark on the side there. Oh, you don't want to move it either, like I just did. So reline yourself back up. I wish they didn't put that name right there because that's a problem for me. Now that is going to be the line that I stitch on. And then when I'm done sewing, I'm going to actually cut right down the center. And then I'm going to open it up and iron them and have some beautiful squares that are going to make these points right here. It's good to have a sharp pencil too, because if you have, I moved it again. If you have a dull pencil, it tends to want to make things wider than what they should be. Check out these glass swirl marbleized pins. I believe Clover makes them. I'll link them below. They are cute. Next, you're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew right down the line on both sides, and I'll meet you right back here. So once you've sewn up both sides, you're going to go ahead and go from point to point and cut them right in half. The next thing I'm going to do is show you how I square up these squares. They should end up to be 2.5 inches after we square it up. There should be little to no waste at all, just the dog ears really, or rabbit ears, whatever you want to call them. But this is how we're going to square it up. You're going to follow the diagonal line here on your ruler. Place it on the diagonal right here on your block, where the two fabrics meet. Once you've lined up everything in 2.5 inches and you can see just a little bit peeking out of the 2.5 inches, you're going to go ahead and trim. Just like that, so it gets that corner. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to slightly turn in and slice. Now you're going to turn it and you're going to do the same thing over here. Now we know that this edge is nice and crisp, so we're going to line up on the 2.5 inch mark on those outer corners and cut. I'm going to go ahead and trim the rest of these, and I'll be right back to show you the rest of the pieces. Here are all of our half square triangles all sewn up, pressed, trimmed, cut out, and ready to go. These right here are the outer points of the star. I want you to notice here, these 4 blocks right here, they're all 2.5 inch squares put together. The first thing I'm going to do is make this tiny block right here and set it aside so that way it's all done. So I'm going to take my berry block, then I'm going to take this one, and then this one, and then my white block. So that right there is this. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, of course. We're going to sew these two together right on the sides there. And then once those are together, we are going to connect these 2 rows after they're sewn together. So go ahead and do all of these. After I sew each step, so say after I sew that, I'm going to iron the seam allowance open just like we did before I go on to the next step. So here is all of the outer star points, which are these right here, this block, these 4 squares. Make one outer block, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. You should have 4 of those. And you can see I pressed all of the seams open, and I also used the wood clapper. Now you will trim this block ever so slightly. There should be little to no waste, and it should end up roughly at 4.5 inches. You can see just a little bit, just shavings really, is all you're going to take off the edges. So you'll trim those up and then just set those aside. And we'll go on to the next piece. The printed fabric that only has 4, that's your frame that's around your union square, which is this right here. And then the other print is going to be the star points that are on the inner star, so to speak. This right here is going to be one whole block, these 4 pieces. So remember we did this block right here had those 4 squares. Now this block right here has the 4 triangles. There's only one white one, 2 colored prints, and then 1 printed one. I offset these blocks just a bit so it would be easier to show you how we're going to connect these. So this is one block right here. What you're going to do is take this like this, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to take this one and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then once you get those 2 connected, you are going to take this one, put it on there, and do a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and that's going to give us our block. I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you how to press that here in a minute. Here I wanted to share with you a tip that might help you when you piece your triangles together. Because these pointy ends can be quite bothersome, to me anyways, my tip for you is always to lead with the pointy end of the triangle, one of the pointy ends. Because it is cut on the bias, it tends to always want to stretch more. So if you start with the pointy end, it tends not to pull at the end. Next, you're going to go ahead and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance and connect these triangles to make one square. So I'm going to do that, and I will be right back. So far, so good. Now you need to trim these as well. You're going to end up with a 4.5 inch block. You're going to line up your block on that diagonal with the diagonal, one of the diagonals that are on your block. So there's that, 4.5 inches. Go ahead and trim up all your blocks, and I'll meet you right back here. So you should have essentially 3 piles at this point, and they're all 4.5 inches squared, all trimmed up. There's very little waste at all. You'll want your center square, of course, to be 4.5 inches, and you want that fussy cut on the bias, on the angle, because that's what's going to offset our union square. Most union squares are straight up and down. Our union square is offset, so you want to make sure that that's cut on the bias. So let's see how this is going to look and work out. That's the whole fun part, right? And that's the offset union square star block. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sew this all together. And how we're going to do that is we are going to look at it traditionally. So we're going to turn it like that, and we're going to sew just like we normally would. We'll take this one, sew a 1/4 inch seam there. Once that's sewn, we'll add this one to there and do a 1/4 inch seam and go by rows. So after I get all my rows sewn up, I'll bring it back and show you what it looks like. The next thing you're going to do is sew the rows together, and then I'll meet you back here. Here's our union square block on the offset, looking pretty. What I did was swap out the colors to make the checkers here, the stripes here, and the blueberries here. and then just swapped them, offsetting them all. And I just really think they turned out super cute. The blocks end up being 12.5 inches square. So because we set them side set, instead of squares on the sides and on the top, you're going to have these half square triangles. And what you'll do is take a 12.5 inch squared piece of fabric and cut it in half. And then you will sew it just like you would in any other quilt. But instead of doing rows this way, you are going to do rows on the diagonal. So you would sew this and then this. I hope that makes sense for you, and I hope you enjoyed my version of the Union Square quilt block. Until next time on the Sewing Channel, take care.